The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 174.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity. Braveheart team.
Change, my dear, and it seems on a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding!
Position he looks wearing a bit thin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 10th Doctor story, The Waters of Mars. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, if you have not yet done so, please go and subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcast app, or at the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should also hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. So we're talking right now about this, the one of the final, there's an asterisk on that, final live-action episode. This is the last live-action episode before the two-part regeneration episodes that we get with the David Tennant's time as the Doctor and Russell T Davies' time running the show. And there is an animated episode we'll be talking about in the future that came out in between. But this really marks the progression from right into the regeneration. And it was originally going to be a Christmas episode when they were planning it. Hence the lingering Christmas-winter references, the snow, a reference to a Christmas dinner that they get in. But so this is where it falls and things. It was broadcast November 15th, 2009, and it won a Hugo Award for the writers, which is interesting. I'm not sure. I mean, there are aspects of it that are really good. I'm not sure I put it on that level.
So I guess a couple things to say about the Hugos. The Hugos are the awards issued by the other sci-fi writers to honor fellow writers. They're different than the major fan award, which is the Nebulas,
right?
But they often track. And this one, best short form dramatic presentation. So it's not being compared to like other sci-fi novels where you get the opportunity to go into way more depth and be all philosophical and stuff. It's also not being compared to long-form sci-fi movies,
right? Where
you could do more world building and character stuff. It's specifically short-form visual presentation, so it's primarily being compared to other sci-fi TV episodes.
Right.
And for years, that was dominated by Star Trek. Star Trek would just win the Hugo every year for that category. And eventually, you started to get some additional stuff. Babylon 5 won, Doctor Who is one, and so it's no longer just Star Trek dominated. But for years, Star Trek was basically the only regular, high-quality TV show sci-fi thing that was being produced. So, of course, it won.
Yeah.
So I thought this was a notable achievement. I thought it deserved a Hugo Award for that category. Having said that, the Hugos have now been poisoned by various factors, and they have severely degraded in value. But back in 2010, when this won a Hugo, they still meant something.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not sure what else was airing in 2009 to compare it against. So it would be interesting to go back and look at.
Yeah, Star Trek was long off the air by that point.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So as far as this story goes, where we should place this in the timeline of things, of the Doctor's timeline, it takes place, as we've been told, just before the Day of the Doctor, the 2013 10th Doctor, 11th Doctor, War Doctor story, the 50th anniversary special, which itself immediately precedes End of Time, which is the beginning of the Doctor's regeneration. So just to sort of place it in our minds what storylines follow after this. So it really deals with what happens to the Doctor, which we've seen before. What happens to the Doctor when he's unregulated and unchecked by either other Time Lords or his companions.
Yep.
As the lone survivor of the Time War, he declares himself to be Time Lord victorious and master of the laws of time. That's what we'll eventually, by the end of this episode. Yeah. But so that's sort of a brief understanding of where they're going.
By the way, I had a thought recently about the Day of the Doctor, and since we've already recorded our thoughts on that, I'll just go ahead and mention it now since we won't be revisiting it in the future. But, originally Stephen Moffat wrote that not with the War Doctor, but with Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor in that same role.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would have established that it was Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor that pushed the big red button to kill all the Time Lords and Daleks. And we have as a sort of companion to the War Doctor in the broadcast version, Billie Piper as the Bad Wolf entity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when she first meets him, she says, "Oh, well, I'm the moment, and I picked this from your, I don't know, past, future, one of those things." And think how meaningful that would have been if it had been Christopher Eccleston's Doctor. So this would have been a young Christopher Eccleston who had not yet met Rose Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, I picked this form from your, I don't know, past, future, one of those things. And he had met the Bad Wolf, the image of the Bad Wolf entity all this time earlier. And think of what of a different light that would cast on his interactions with Rose Tyler once he meets her in the department store. It's like, oh, I'm going to take an interest in this person.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before. So let's talk about this episode. It begins with Adelaide Brooke, I think it is.
Adelaide Brooke, Captain Adelaide Brooke.
She's talking to her daughter on Earth via a recording from Mars.
And that's realistic because Mars is an average of 14 light minutes away. So it's really, at its closest, it's 4 light minutes away, but it's an average of 14. And so you cannot hold real-time conversations with people. It would be maddening with the latency.
To say the least.
Yes. And we're also given the idea that the solar flares are causing communications problems, which is something that kind of lends to the isolation that they will experience in this episode. They can't consult with Earth for whatever is going on.
By the way, so Captain Adelaide Brooke is played by Lindsay Duncan, and I have long thought that Lindsay Duncan could pull off the Doctor. Now, in this, she's very serious, but they're just like now that we're starting to cast women as the Doctor, you have to think about what's the personality range. And with Jodie Whittaker, they've gone friendly is the dominant personality note. But I've thought that after they prove to us that a woman Doctor can be friendly, which they needed to, I think it would be nice to explore a more strict feminine Doctor. And I think Lindsay Duncan would be able to pull, this is made 10 years ago, so she may feel she's too old at this point or whatever to act in a series with as intensive amount of filming as this involves.
Right.
But in terms of her ability as an actress to do a more strict version of the Doctor, I think she could do that, add in a little bit of humor, and I think she'd be good to go. She already displays warmth in this.
Right.
But she also displays strictness. And I think that combination, that Lindsay Duncan, Adelaide Brooke combination of characteristics, you add in a little bit of humor, I think you've got a good recipe for a Doctor.
I like that idea. I mean, it would be sort of in the strain of the seriousness of like a Capaldi. He was more grumpy.
Without the grumpiness and goofiness. Yeah, just more warm but strict with some humor.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting idea. Yeah, because I enjoy her portrayal in this. She has a way. Interesting that they tried originally to get Helen Mirren to play this role, but weren't able to make it work. So I thought that was interesting. I think it works well as it is. So we have the TARDIS landing on Mars. The Doctor emerges in his space suit, the one from what was the one where the
42, the Impossible Planet.
So he's got wearing that space suit, and he sees moon base or Mars base called Bowie Base 1.
Although he doesn't know that it's that one yet.
Not yet.
But just as he comes out of the TARDIS, he's smiling, he's happy, so he's no longer being Mr. Grumpy Companionless Doctor.
Yes.
And he's gotten over his Donna trauma.
And and there's not enough episodes where they're in inhospitable atmospheres, where they actually have to suit up. There's just not enough episodes like that.
Yes. I did want to note that they named it Bowie Base 1 after David Bowie, for his song, the
Space Odyssey.
Mars song, Space Odyssey. Thank you.
Life on Mars.
Life on Mars.
Or Life Mars. Okay.
Yeah. It's actually probably what it's Life on Mars. So the very interesting reference there. The Doctor, as he's observing this base from afar, he's put under arrest by a robot called Gadget, a very annoying robot.
Gadget.
And he's brought in to under threat of a gun held by Captain Adelaide Brooke. He's placed under arrest, and he said, "Name, rank, and intention: the Doctor, and fun." It's fun. And meanwhile, I don't think there's enough. Well, they're on Mars. They're the first settlers on Mars, and this guy shows up, and it's sort of, I don't know. I just don't feel like they are skeptical enough. They are blown away enough by the fact of this guy showing up. I mean, there's some reference to other places who may have sent him.
The Philippines or Spain or maybe the Branson inheritance, which is a reference to
Richard Branson,
and Virgin Galactic.
Yes.
But they don't. I mean, they don't like put him in a room and interrogate him and lock him up. I mean, when there's a crisis in the garden, that's like, you're coming with me, as opposed to we're locking you up.
Yes. Yeah, we can't deal with you right now, so we're putting you over here.
I mean, it's just not even like, where's your ship? How did you get here? How did we not see something come from orbit? We would have seen something on our sensors somewhere. Nope.
Right. So we cut to the gardeners in the big biodome where they're growing all their food. And one of them eats a carrot and starts acting weirdly because, I mean, if you eat carrots, that's just weird to begin with. But he ends up becoming water zombies of Mars. That's what I call it. When the Doctor finds out who they actually are, he realizes who they are. They're the first colonists on Mars. We have this
gushes about him. It's like, it's so great to meet you. Oh, everybody knows you. Everybody always will know you. And then he says, "How long have you been here?" 17 months. What's today's date? November 21st. I have to leave.
We get this montage of these. Yeah, we get this montage of these web pages where he sees their profiles and their obituaries, and he realizes this is the date they died in history. And so he's like, "I'm sorry from the depths of both my hearts. I have to go. I really have no choice but to leave." And but when they hear these weird growls coming over the intercom from the biodome, and it starts to shut down, it's like, "No, you're not going anywhere." In fact, Adelaide says, "You're coming with me to the biodome." And so they have to go over to that.
What I like about this is they've established now earlier in New Who, as early as Christopher Eccleston's time, the idea of a fixed point in time. Right. They gave a name to something that has previously been on the show, but they didn't have a name for it. But now we have the name Fixed Point.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time since they've established that where a Doctor has walked into a fixed point in time, something he knows cannot change. And he's not going to be, in his mind, able to save anybody. And I love the anxiety that creates for him and the I have to get out of here thing, which is the main forward driving element for the Doctor's personal story arc in this. That's what creates the drama for him, is for the first time on the show, he's encountering a situation where he knows he can't save people in this way.
Yeah, the Doctor's primary motive, his primary mission in life is to save people. And so he's got these things that he can't, times when he can't save people. Yeah, that conflict in him is really the driver of this episode, right?
Yeah.
So they walk down these very long corridors. Okay, let's address the corridors. Why do they have these mile-long corridors between everything? That, I mean, why would you waste so many resources on them? Especially when later on she's like, oh, we couldn't bring bikes. A bike would cost so much fuel. Well, you spent all the money to build these hunky...
The corridor.
Because you got to have corridors to run down. This is Doctor Who. It's written into their contracts. They got to have corridors to run down.
And not just corridors, warehouse-sized corridors.
Yeah. Isn't it going to be, you can just imagine the conversations among the designers. Isn't it going to be hard for people to get down these mile-long corridors without any transport? Oh, no, it's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Yeah.
There needs to be a pitch meeting for that. So we also get the doctor talking about how he doesn't like robots because people dress them up and give them silly names. But when Yuri, one of the other astronauts, mentions his sister's robot dog, the doctor says, oh, well, that's different.
Dogs, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
K9.
K9 reference.
Yep.
Adelaide then says it's been 40 years of chaos back on Earth with near extinction of the human race, which made me think, so it's November 21st, 2059, so 40 years, it starts in 2019. Now. So it has a... Yeah, what near extinction of the human race events would be? Never mind. So,
no.
So they get to the biodome, and Adelaide starts calling out for Andrew Stone. It's Captain Brooke, and I'm like, is there more than one Andrew here? Like, Andrew Stone. There's 9 people on the planet. One of them's named Andrew.
Well, she's pretty formal at times, so
yeah. I just thought it was a funny little human lapse. The other interesting thing is that so her second in command is this guy Ed, who keeps getting slapped down by her.
Oh, she's mean to him.
Like he also keeps getting sort of too big for his britches, a little bit like exceeding his mandate as in going beyond what he's supposed to be doing, and it's like it's a very interesting dynamic they got going on here.
It's problematic on both their parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, and at the very end, he mentions about how you could never forgive me, and of course they don't go into it because then the shuttle blows up at that point. But
right,
there's a prior relationship there that this is caused, or that this is caused by.
Specifically, what he says is, "I hated this bloody job. You never gave me a chance. Never could forgive me. See you later."
Right.
Yeah, boom.
Yeah. So interesting reference to a back history that we never get. So then they have the doctor that they're with, Dr. Tariq, finds, I'm going to call him Wet Andy.
Okay.
Because like Wet Heather from the 12th Doctor's time.
Oh, yeah.
But we have Wet Andy, who's dripping everywhere. Meanwhile, and he gets zombified by him. Meanwhile, in the sick bay, Maggie, who's the other gardener, gets overcome by the aliens in a delayed fashion and starts talking about wanting Earth and all its water, but she's being kept in isolation, so it's okay for the moment.
And let's talk about the effects for these water zombies. So apparently when you become a water zombie full on, you put in contact lenses, so your eyes look different. Yep. And there's this kind of modeling around your mouth where it looks like the skin has swelled up and fractured.
Yeah.
And water is constantly pouring out of your mouth, and your whole body is soaked in water, and you can also, water will drip off of your hands in an abnormally aggressive way. And they explain that there's some kind of internal fission process happening to make this water.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, wait, that doesn't make sense because fission breaks apart atoms and water is an agglomeration of atoms, and that's not the right term. And also, where is the mass coming from? Because you've got water pouring off of these people.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And their body mass is not changing. They're not shriveling up to nothing as that happens. So this mass is coming from somewhere. On the other hand, my heart goes out to the actors. I think that had to portray these parts because they've got water pouring out of their mouths constantly. And they either did tons and tons of spit takes or they used the modeling around the mouth to hide an input tube to get a water tube in their mouth that could just shower this stuff out.
There's a couple of scenes.
They're not breathing out of those mouths during these long scenes when they're standing around gurgling water.
There's a couple of times where you can actually see where basically they have what looks like a hockey or mouth guard, and it's got a little tube that's connected inside the mouth where the water's just pouring out basically from the front of their mouth. You could just see it just right, and it's just like, oh, I would be gagging so bad if that was me right now.
Well, and it must have been unpleasant, even just standing around being soaked all the time. That. So,
Well, then they've got
them.
the scenes where they're literally shooting water out of their hands, almost like the force lightning. They had to have a big hose basically running up their sleeve as they're doing this. That could not have been pleasant.
Fire hose size hose.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was very interesting effects that they had going here.
By the way, one other realism note is we've got these people on this planet, and they're here for a minimum of 5 years before they see anybody else.
Yeah.
What are the living arrangements here?
As in,
I mean,
we only
these people
5
aren't naturally paired off. But in any kind of long-term colony, you send pairs of men and women. I mean, married people historically.
Now there are, if I remember right, it was like a star, like a 5-pointed star, basically, is what the actual thing was, and we only saw 2 of the domes, the central dome and the food dome. So you assume they've got much more living quarters available than we see.
Oh, yeah. I'm not concerned about their living quarters. I'm concerned about the interpersonal relationships of these people. Historically, you set up a colony, you send families. That's what a colony is. It's not a research base where you send people who are single or are married, but their family isn't with them. If you're establishing a colony where you don't have other outside humans coming for years, you send families.
Well, it looks like at least what was it? Roman and I forget the other one. The Asian girl
are a couple
paired off.
Are a couple? Maybe, but they don't establish any of that on screen, and they ought to. It would juice the drama. It's like, that's my wife, and what are we doing about this?
No, they do establish that they're a couple. There's a scene where they're holding hands and they look intimate and not like
that's
married,
all
but
subtle. It needs to, for the drama and the realism, it needs to be explicit, and you need to play off of this.
Sure. So at this point, the doctor and Adelaide, they end up having to run for the door. They run into the long corridor. Adelaide orders everyone not to drink any water or touch it, not even a drop. And they have to run down this mile-long corridor with the aliens chasing them. Aliens are faster, so the doctor soups up Gadget, which goes so fast it leaves trails of fire a la Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Well, I love it, though. It's like, it goes 2 miles an hour, so he soups it up, and then you see the scene where they're riding it, and it's like, like you can see the bad guys behind him. Yeah, he souped it up to a whole 5 miles an hour.
So the aliens apparently can't get through the airlock because it's, did they say hermetically sealed?
Yeah, hermetically sealed. That's a real thing.
Okay. No, well, I get the seal, but is a hermetic seal like they can't shoot water through it? I mean, somehow it's impervious.
Obviously not, because they're eventually able to do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So the doctor ends up. They end up going to the sick bay where the doctor talks to Wet Maggie in ancient North Martian, which is good. Ed says it's nonsense. There's no such thing. But he also reasons out that she's creating the water. I guess if the source of the mass, like the oxygen, is one key part, so they could be pulling it in from the air, but the hydrogen is the thing, like where they're getting the hydrogen from to make the water. That's a good one. So they Adelaide orders evacuation of the base. That they have a protocol for that.
Action Procedure 1.
Yes.
They're also sitting on top of a glacier, which is where their water supply comes from.
Right. The doctor points out that any one of them could be infected and not know it. So because Maggie didn't churn right away, so they really can't leave yet. So Adelaide and the doctor go to look at the ice field.
I think he was implying more than that. It's like if you take even one drop of water back to Earth, it's going to infect Earth. He's hinting at Action Procedure 5 because he knows that they're going to detonate a nuke today.
Yep.
Right. He's
trying to prep her for that.
Yeah. When they go to look at this glacier that they sit on top of, he mentions the ice warriors.
Mm-hmm.
In sort of why don't we see them? He thinks that maybe they froze the creatures in the ice. That's why they were there. That the ice warriors took care of them before.
Right. So they had like attacked the Ice Warriors, and the Ice Warriors used their tech to freeze them. And in a deleted scene, he suggests maybe that's why they're not here. They left the planet also.
Oh, interesting. Okay. The doctor then asks Adelaide what inspired her life, to become an astronaut, and she recalls that day that the Daleks stole the Earth, what we've seen previously, and her parents were killed by the Daleks, or presumably they left and they never came back. But she saw a Dalek through the skylight.
They just used the Dalek invasion as an excuse.
Right.
Yep.
Yes, and she, oh gosh, that is so dark. Hey, honey, it's our chance now to abandon our child. Oh, finally, we can get rid of her. That is dark. But she ends up seeing a Dalek through the skylight, and it's right there, and it doesn't kill her, it doesn't exterminate her. It just looks at her.
It looked into me, suggesting a deep recognition.
Right, yep. And she decides, and it flies off into the sky. And that moment is when she decided she would follow it into space. And that's how she became an astronaut.
And the doctor starts hinting to her about what's going to happen in her own future. That he's prepping her again for the suicide decision. Because it's like, you've told your granddaughter this, and 30 years from now, inspired by your legacy, she's going to go to Alpha Centauri, and then your other descendants will lead humanity into the stars. And it all starts with you. And what you do here today.
Yeah.
And she says, why are you telling me this? And he says, as a consolation.
Right. But Adelaide then discovers that due to the timing of things and the way the water circulated or something, no one else could possibly be infected right now.
Yeah, they find a video of Andy the gardener complaining about the fact that one of the water filters has just gone out and the replacement filters they sent don't fit. So just today is when unfiltered water first got into the biodome, and thus the infection just got in today. So he and Maggie are the only ones who would have been infected.
Except Maggie.
They then infected the doctor.
Right. But also Maggie is walking around, in their place. So is there no sweat coming off? I mean, it's just that assurance that we couldn't possibly be infected.
And as we know, in the era of coronavirus, water droplets get exhaled by people and inhaled by other people, but apparently not. This pathogen isn't communicated that way.
It doesn't matter in the end.
By the way, speaking of coronavirus and lockdowns and stuff, it's interesting that we're reviewing this episode right now because it's all about infections, and we've got to make sure we have the food supplies, and let's stock up on the food supplies here. And
I mean, hopefully by the time this gets broadcast out, a lot of that has been lifted. But as we're sitting here right now, not so much.
Don't count on it.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
So I know this wasn't planned this way. This is just in the natural rotation of things, folks. So, and all that stuff about Maggie, breathing out water droplets or sweat doesn't matter anyway, because while they're getting ready to evacuate onto the shuttle, Wet Andy and Wet Tarek are on the roof trying to get through with water. Water will find its way through any crack, that sort of thing, as we know.
I was going to say, if you've ever had a roof that leaks, trying to find the actual source of the leak is a major pain in the butt. Water does find way into every little crack.
Also, Maggie has escaped now and has been doing the pod scream to all the other infected people.
That's right, calling them. Meanwhile, the doctor just stands there staring at them all, looking sad.
But Adelaide has kicked him out. She said, I know what day this is. This is the day we escape. You take your spacesuit, go back to your spaceship, and have a good life or whatever. But he delays. He watches as they're making preparations. They're trying to get the protein packs back onto the shuttle so they don't starve on the way to Earth. And the men are attacking from above, and the doctor is just grimly watching them. And he finally turns to leave, and then Adelaide locks him in the airlock to have a little chit-chat.
Right. She demands to know what he knows. And he says, basically, imagine you were in Pompeii, and no matter what you did to try to save them, anything you do just makes it happen, which is a reference to
the fires of Pompeii from just the previous season.
Yes. And so the doctor, again, a reference to that fixed point in time. You can't, no matter what he does, he can't change it, as he knows.
Although there's a variation in the dialogue, and the dialogue in this scene is really nicely textured. It's really well done between him and Adelaide talking over the intercom. She in particular shows a lot of emotional complexity as she's trying to get her head around what the doctor is telling her. And she like threatens him, says, I could increase the pressure and crush you in there. And he says, but you won't, because that's not who you are. And there's a variation in dialogue where he says, I can't save you, because she's the one with the future that inspires humanity. But he doesn't, he's conflating the fact he can't save her with the idea he can't save other people. And he finally does tell her what happened. He says, you're going to go to Action 5 today. You're going to detonate the nuke. No one's ever going to know why, but you were saving Earth. And he says, I think that Dalek spared you because he recognized you and knew you were a fixed point in time, that you couldn't die now without disrupting the timeline.
Which is interesting that even the Daleks understood that you can't mess with the timeline. Like that, like as implacable exterminators that they are, even they knew that they shouldn't.
It's funny too. We've had 2 episodes now where that's been brought up, because in Revelation or Remembrance of the Daleks, the Doctor says the same thing. Even they wouldn't change the timeline that dramatically.
Right.
And after he said he can't save her, she says, who's going to save you? And he says, Captain Adelaide Brooke. And that's when she opens the airlock on him. And lets him out.
So as he's walking away, he listens as it's a lot of drama, a lot of things going on. He's listening as the water starts coming in. Steffi, the German crew member, she gets separate from the others, and she's locked in this isolation room and stops to listen to a message in German from a little girl, presumably a family member, daughter, maybe.
Yeah, a little girl and a little boy. So she spends her last moments as a free, conscious human watching family video, which is really touching.
Yes, it was.
And
very
then they see her out. We get in the reverse angle shot. We see her transforming, and it's from behind, and she's just jerking and twitching as the water takes her over, and it is as water is pouring down from the ceiling. It is so creepy.
Yes. And so the others, they're trying to get out. It's just Ed on the shuttle and Roman. Oh, what is her name? Mia. That's her name. And Yuri and Adelaide. Roman gets in. It's like behind them, and a drop of water falls from the ceiling and touches him on the cheek. And he stops and tells the others to go without him. And Mia screams no, and they drag her off, and and so he's doomed.
Would have been better if he'd hit him in the eye.
Yeah,
because that's a mucous membrane, and I mean that's the thing. When you're not touching your face, that's one of the key things you're not getting in contact with is the entryway into your internal systems.
Yes,
exactly.
That your skin is meant to protect you.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Ed is on the shuttle getting it ready, and he looks down, and there's Maggie standing below him, and she sprays him with water, and just before he can be taken over, he self-destructs the shuttle. Maggie somehow gets away. Not sure how, but she does. And that blows up, and
she'd done all she needed to was get in there and infect them.
Right. Yep. She was. I think she was trying to get control of them so they can control the shuttle and take off. But meanwhile, the Doctor, who's outside, still walking away, gets knocked down. And at this moment,
turns out that that whatever they're got here will burn in the very thin Martian atmosphere. We've got lots of flames here.
Yes, that's right. And this is the point where he sort of remembers that he is the last of the Time Lords, and they're no longer around to stop him from doing whatever he wants. That he's the ultimate arbiter of whatever he's going to do. And he says he's not going to die here because he was told. He tells them that he was told he would only die when someone knocks 4 times. At which point, Andy knocks on the door 3 times.
And he says 3 knocks is all you're getting, and
it electrocutes him. Which I'm wondering, why didn't they start with electrocuting these guys? But whatever. Okay. And then he goes into Time Lord Victorious mode. The laws of time will obey me now. And as the Doctor works frantically to save everyone, this time using Gadget, he's going to use Gadget to save everyone.
The TARDIS remote control is a robot that he controls with his hands.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love how he's like saying, what's in this storage compartment? And so, well, it's got atom clamps and spare robots and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, who needs atom clamps? I've got a funny robot.
Yes. I think the interesting thing now is we have this contrast. Before it was the doctor who was emotionless while Adelaide was all frantic. Now it's switched. The doctor is frantic. Adelaide sort of goes into this emotionless mode to enact Action 5, self-destruct.
Yeah, and she is now not on the same side as the doctor. We've also had them flip in terms of their orientation. Previously, the doctor was prepping her for Action 5, and she was resisting. Now he's resisting, and she's determined to go forward with Action 5. And it's very clear as he's triumphantly strutting around doing stuff, trying to save them. He even tells her, I'll fight you if I have to. But she is not on board with what he's doing now. She is on the other side. She realizes he's gone insane, and this is really bad, and we have to do what we need to do here, even if it means dying.
And so we have this, the countdown, and then everything blows up, but the TARDIS arrived just in time for them to get inside, just as the nuke goes off, and they get transported back to a snowy London right outside Adelaide's house. Mia runs off. Yuri follows her. Mia's so distraught and confused by everything that happened.
And that was nice. It was nice to see someone see the TARDIS and not just be amazed and wonder, but actually freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she's a little traumatized.
Yeah, that was nice. And
meanwhile, the doctor is standing there. Well, isn't anybody going to thank me?
Yeah,
I just saved your lives. Give me a little gratitude here.
Right.
So Adelaide tells Yuri to go take care of her, which he does. And the doctor is like, okay, we're in front of Adelaide's house, and she wasn't she's already been gone for 2 years. And she wasn't planning on coming back for at least 5. And that house is still not rented out to someone else
or sold.
Or sold, really?
Yeah. But she says I'm supposed to be dead, and she objects to the possibility that the entire future of the human race could be changed because he saved her, and she.
She says the whole of human history could change. No one should have that much power, and he says tough.
Yeah,
right.
And he then goes on to start talking about how I've saved little people before, but you're the first major person I've saved. I'm good. And the phrase
he
little
didn't even
people.
use little people. He used unimportant people. And of course, then you flash forward to number 11, Dr. Matt Smith's doctor. 900 years of time and space. I've never met anyone who wasn't important.
Yeah.
She also, I'm pretty sure he also used little people, and she snags on that and starts taking him to task for it, about as if anybody is insignificant.
Yeah.
I would say at this moment, the doctor is more like the master than he's ever been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's very close to be, without the Time Lords, without the restrictions of the laws of time, without companions to keep him grounded. He is very much like the master, and I think that's one of the dynamics that they really explore with this.
Yeah, I think it's deliberate, because he's talking about the laws of time, and he says, "And they will obey me," which is a variant on the master's phrase, "I am the master, and you will obey me."
Definitely. Yes, this is a very interesting exploration of the doctor's psyche and his connection to the master historically over time. So Adelaide basically says she says and does, you think you're in control, but you're not. And she goes in the house.
Well, and she says, I don't care who you are. The Time Lord Victorious is wrong.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he unlocks her door for her with the sonic and says, basically, get out of here. And she goes in, but as she's going in, she turns and we see she's still got her service weapon on her hip, and she draws it. And
she commits suicide inside. And that moment he sees those web pages in his mind again and sees that her legacy is preserved. Minor changes of, instead of she died on Mars, she died on Earth.
Right.
And then we have Yuri and Mia in the news, talking about it.
Which is interesting for all the preparation the doctor did for her death on Mars, and convincing her that by her dying, her granddaughter would be the first to fly the super, faster than light ship and all that. that she realizes I can't survive this. Otherwise, that won't happen.
Right.
Now, they do a pretty good job establishing how this alteration to the timeline works. I mean, the doctor, when she says, well, what about my legacy and when my granddaughter and everything, the doctor says, oh, well, Adelaide Brooke can inspire her face-to-face now. The details change, but the story remains the same. So that was his plan, and she could have gone along with that. But she from talking to him, she has become scared not about her future, but about everyone's future.
Right.
That he can change, that without moral restraint, he could do anything to human history. And she even asks him, is there nothing you can't do? And he says, not anymore. And so the reason she commits suicide is not to preserve her legacy for her granddaughter. It's to stop him from thinking he's the Time Lord victorious and can do anything he wants.
Right.
And that works. He is, once she's killed herself, he realizes I've gone too far and says it.
Yes.
What I wonder is they don't do, I think, quite enough to explain how the new timeline plays out. You know, he sees that her obituary now says she died on Earth instead of Mars. And then we see web pages or news stories where Yuri and Mia have explained how she died to protect Earth, or how her actions protected Earth. But they gloss over how they got back to Earth the same day. And they gloss over specifically how she died on Earth. So I'm like, how does this inspire her granddaughter if she came back to Earth and committed suicide once she was back on Earth? The best I can headcanon it is in order to make her a heroic figure, they suppressed the fact it was suicide. They just said she undertook actions to get back to Earth and died once they got back to Earth, but she got this part of her crew safely back, and she protected us all from the flood. That's the name of the villain. By taking Action 5 back on Mars. So I can only think they suppressed the fact, the news did, that it was actually suicide.
You know, it's interesting to think about, too, because given like the psychology of someone who would undertake such a mission to Mars, the people who do such a thing have to be willing to give their lives. They have to be psychologically prepared for sacrificing everything. This is such a risky proposition. The odds are you're not going to make it. You're probably going to die. You know, the whole, the Martian movie, the book and movie.
Don't tell Elon Musk.
Yeah. Sorry, Elon. So the fact that she's mentally prepared for that probably helps, lead to this ability to take this action. You mentioned, Jimmy, that the doctor says, I've gone too far, and he turns and sees Ood Sigma standing in the street and asks, is now the time for my death? It's have I gone too far? Now I have to die? That this is continuing that whole arc, the mythological arc that is going to lead to his regeneration.
Your song will end and all that. Yeah.
Yes. And he goes and then he disappears. So I'm not even quite sure whether Ood Sigma was really there or if he was imagining it.
I think he was there.
Okay. But then he goes inside and the TARDIS's cloister bell begins tolling to once again foretell his death.
Imminent danger for him. Yeah.
Yes.
And he says no, and so he's resisting going to his death now, and takes the TARDIS somewhere else to try to run from it.
Right. The last time the cloister bell was foretelling the Doctor's death and regeneration was the Fourth Doctor's regeneration, right?
It certainly did on that occasion.
Yep. Yeah, I think I read that was the last time it did that, which is interesting. But so now he's running from his which is from all he can tell will be his last regeneration. We've talked about this several times. This would have been
based on later continuity. Yeah.
So that you could say would be why he's running from it. Any last thoughts on this particular story, Father Cory?
Nothing here.
Jimmy?
I really liked it. I thought this was a great story. I thought there were elements, that they could have done better, done more with. But overall, I really liked this story. I think it deserved the Hugo it got.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I remember the first time I watched it and being so blown away by, excuse the pun, by the end of it where she actually goes through with it and kills herself.
And that's something, since we comment on things from the faith perspective, even though dramatically that makes this a very powerful ending, in reality, suicide is not the answer.
Right.
No.
Right. There would have been, there could have been, and would have been other ways to resolve the problem. Although suicide's not the answer, but what about the nuking the base and not leaving? Would that, like Action 5?
So if there was no way, like if they didn't have the TARDIS, nuking the base and not having a way out, that's fine, because you are saving people there. Your death in that case is not suicide. It is a foreseeable side effect of an action that needs to be taken, but it is not a means to another end or an end in itself. It is a side effect.
It's more of a self-sacrifice in defense of the planet, of the people on the planet, not just killing yourself for the sake of killing yourself.
Right.
Okay.
In moral theology, there's a principle known as the law of double effect, which says that you can do something that has a foreseen evil effect. In this case, it's your own death being a physical evil, not a moral evil. You can undertake an action foreseeing that it has a second effect. That's why it's called the law of double effect, because it's got two effects, provided that the primary effect is not immoral and overbalances the secondary effect, and also providing the secondary effect is not a means to achieving the first effect. So in this case, saving Earth from the flood, that's the primary effect.
Right.
And that does overbalance the death of the 5 remaining people. But the death of the 5 remaining people is not a means to that end. If we could all teleport out like by a TARDIS, we would do that. So we're not killing ourselves as a means of stopping the flood. We're killing ourselves. We're not killing ourselves, actually. We're just we're stopping the flood, and we're going to die as a result of that if we don't get teleported out of there.
Right.
But that's a side effect, and consequently, the side effect can be tolerated for the sake of the greater good of the primary effect. So it's in a morally different category than suicide, where you're killing yourself either in order to kill yourself, that's the goal, or as a means to some other end, like I'm going to kill myself so I can punish someone by making them feel guilty for my death. That would be killing yourself as a means to another end.
Right.
And the Doctor does make the point, like, you don't have to die to inspire your granddaughter to go out into the stars. You can inspire her right here while being alive with her.
Yeah.
So that she didn't have to die, but dramatically they want to make.
She did it to take the Doctor down a peg and thus help human history. But here's where it's a problem, because she did kill herself as a means to the end of taking the Doctor down a peg.
Right.
So in the first case, it would have been okay for her to envision her death and accept it. Here, it's actually not, because she's violating the principle of double effect.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So very good episode. Deserving of the accolades it gets, and probably one of the better ones of the Russell T Davies era, given that it comes at the very end. But,
what a great irony.
Yes, but well, you could say it's a climactic point. So go out on a high. We, as I mentioned before, there is an animated episode that we'll talk about before the final regeneration episode that's called Dreamland, that was released as a series of webisodes and then released as a whole piece apparently on BBC in the December of that year before the Christmas episodes. We've already discussed the regeneration episodes, End of Time, and I forget what the other one is.
Two-part. It's just End of Time parts 1 and 2.
Oh, okay. That must be why I don't remember it. We've talked about those actually a couple of years ago, but you can go and check in our archives for that. I'll put links to those in the show notes for this. And we've also talked about the first episode for the 11th Doctor. We've done all of the regeneration episodes already in our discussions, and those are all online. But once we talk about Dreamland, then we're going to do a retrospective of the Russell T Davies era and of the 10th Doctor, one of the most beloved Doctors in the new Who. So we're going to have some fun with that. So. But I think that wraps it up pretty well there. We do want to take a moment before we go to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Doctor Who, including Kay Hansen, Chris P., Brendan, Matt T., and Dennis W. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits this show every week for us. We are very grateful for his assistance. So that's it from us. What did you think of The Waters of Mars? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or by sending an email to doctorwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time and we'll be discussing the 4th Doctor story, Image of the Fendal. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, water is patient, Adelaide. Water just waits. It wears down the cliff tops, the mountains, the whole of the world. Water always wins.
Right. This is going to be fun.